Hey, Tactical Painter out in the Suits Crafting Woodshop. Got a really unique one up today. One of the things that I love about pen turning is that there's very little waste. Like, we kind of use like all of the mill ends and cut off pieces and all the little tiny parts and bits and doodads that you can get from all of the milling processes that you get from wood crafting, you know, making large articles of furniture and whatnot. Like, we kind of get all of the ends and bits and bobs or little tiny pieces. And we can use all of those. And then even further, today I've got an idea for even using smaller blocks, little bits and bobs of mill ends from even doing my own wood processing that you see all of my wood stacked up here from my really exotic pieces of lumber. So I've got two pieces that were cut-offs from creating calico maple burl pen blanks that I've been stabilizing. And so when I cut those down to 5 inches long, sometimes I end up with just these, like, this one's only like 1.25 inches long, and this one's like just about 2 inches long if I had to guesstimate. Together they don't really make one full blank. Like, here's a pen tube from my editor pens that I convert into G2, and you can see there, like, if I put those at the ends, there's all this blank left over in the middle. And so I had an idea the other day of what I can do with some of these little tiny mill ends to create less waste. When I graduated high school, I graduated with a dual degree, one in woodworking and the other one in environmental sciences. And people thought that those kind of were counterintuitive because, like, you're learning about the environment, how to preserve it, but I'm also learning how to woodwork, which uses up the environment. And what I always told them was that it actually gave me a better appreciation for the work that I do. You know, everything gives life. I'm a meat eater. I know that, you know, the meat that I eat comes from something else that was living. I also know that the wood that I'm turning came from something else that is living, and it gives me a better appreciation for the products that I'm working with. So let me get the camera flipped around and we'll show you what we're going to do with this blank to preserve these little pieces. Okay, so I've got my two end pieces. I've got my tube. And I put a line on here, not because these are from the same piece, but because I noticed, like, this was the back of the board, and then this was the top of the board as I was cutting it. And it looks like those actually have, like, a pretty nice lineup. Like right here, this line actually lines up perfectly, even though they're from two separate sections of the board. They're kind of cut next to each other. Like, that lines up really nicely. And I think once they're separated apart, that section will still look pretty good as is. If we rotate that around, you can kind of see, like, those will look good. And then I also have, because I had such a large gap left over when I put those together, I also grabbed out of my my burning bin, because I have a wood fireplace, so little cutoffs like this, like when I was milling this piece of cocobolo wood blank, you know, I cut it into 3/4 sections, or actually I cut this one into a 7/8 inch wide section, and then I had this like 1/4 inch section left over. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to glue it to the end of my blank in between. So I'll have these two pieces of wood at my ends, this section of 1/4 inch cocobolo on both ends here, and I'm going to do something really special in the middle. This was cut with a bandsaw, and so I went through my sander, got it all nice and flat. These were also cut with the bandsaw, so I hit them on the sander, got them all nice and flat, perfect 90-degree angles, so that way they're completely flat. So I'm going to go get this cut up into another square, and then we will get these glued on and into place. Just going to use my Glue Boost fill and finish, because I know that when I glue those in place, they won't white out. I'll have a perfectly clear seam line, so even if you do see it, it'll just be kind of like a clear black line. And it lets me use activator that won't cause it to blush. So I'm going to put the glue onto this little end block here. Just get that nice and coated. Then I'm going to spray activator onto that. Bring my block over and set that in place, and that should solidify in just a moment. There we go. I'll just activate the squeeze out there so I don't get stuck to it. And we'll do the same on this one. Hold that away while I spray activator on that piece. And just press that on, just like that. And we'll just activate the squeeze out. Now beforehand I kind of laid these out to make sure I had my grain lined up. So there I have the concentricity line that I drew earlier just as a reference, and my grains are both going the same direction. So now we got one more process to do in order to get these drilled so I can glue my tube in with a gap in the middle. So the problem that I have is I need to connect these two together so that the way they stay in line like this when I do the drilling. My original plan was I was actually going to put an angle on these, but because of what my next step's going to be, I decided to do a 90-degree in order to emulate what I'm actually using this blank to practice for another project. So if I were doing an angle on these, this would be more critical, because if you're trying to drill through an angle and they're two separate pieces, then your drill bit, when it hits that angle, can wander out of center. And so I needed a way to put the two pieces together, and I remembered watching John Malecki, who's another YouTuber, do this quite a few times in order to temporarily bond two pieces together. And his technique is to use blue painter's tape on both pieces, put a dot of glue on one side, activator on the other, put them together, and then afterward they just peel back apart. So we're going to try that now. Don't need a very big piece of painter's tape here. Just need about that size. Then I can use the other half for the other side. Just want to make sure that all that wood is covered. Now I'm going to put a dot of glue here, just right in the center. Spray activator on this piece, holding this one away so you don't activate it before you've touched them together. Get those lines lined up and then press them together. And that should give me a temporary yet permanent bond in this direction. If you try and crack them this way, they'll come apart, which is the intended purpose. But this direction, those two pieces should hold together. All right, and now I can let that set for just a few minutes, and we'll glue that up. Okay, so here we are the next day, not because I needed to let the glue set overnight, but just because I ran out of time and needed to get to work. But so what I've done now is I went over my bandsaw and just kind of ran the blade and knocked off the protruding sections of that coco bolo that was sticking out. That way I can put it into my chuck jaws here and get these drilled up. Okay, well, once I drilled through there, they kind of let loose. Oh, the tape let loose. Damn. A little bit of chip out there. Probably because it wasn't holding completely flat against it. Oh, wow. That's terrible. That didn't work at all. Well, fudge nucket. Experiment failed. So because of the spalted nature of this, and I didn't stabilize this wood, I literally pulled out of my burn cutoffs. And you can't burn stabilized wood. So since I pulled it out of my burn cutoffs, the spalted areas here aren't stabilized. And I should have thought of this. This section is really soft. And then this section of the wood is really hard. And as I was drilling into this end, I couldn't seem to keep the bit from wanting to wander over into this area. And so I think that's why it's so far off center. Because this section's really soft, this section's really hard, and it just kind of pushed it over this way. I should have stabilized these first. And yeah, the bit just kept staying in that area because that's where all of the spalting was. So it just kept tracking north in this blank, following the soft areas. I'll have to try this with either a stabilized hardwood cutoff pieces or just using regular wood. But spalting that's not stabilized probably won't work for this because your bit's just going to follow in that soft section as it drills out. Try this again. Like every good woodworker's shop, especially pen turners, it's not like we don't have a plethora of just cut-off pieces in a bag or in a box, either for the burn bin or for projects just like this. So I'm going to dig through some of these, find a good piece or two. Maybe a little piece of olive wood there. See what we can find, and then I'll spare you having to watch the steps all over again. Okay, so next step down, I found a couple of pieces of maple, one maple burl and one figured maple in that burn bag. Nice pieces, but just too short to even do. Like my shortest kit is like a bolt action, and these were too short for even that. So they were in my discard burn bin, but one step I did differently was I fully wrapped the tape around the edges, because I noticed that the area where it separated was actually the tape. The glue held, but the tape separated because that's not very much surface area in between the blanks while it's drilling. And so the tape wrapped around, holding on the sides, is going to give it a lot more strength. Now, when I put this in my jaws, you can see the seam line for my glue up is outside the jaws, meaning this piece that's out here is going to have absolutely no support while it's drilling. So I'm going to go shorten up this blank here in order to get that seam to the inside. And I've got plenty of length here to spare, as you can see from my tube, which is why I didn't do a Cocobolo piece in the middle here, because these two pieces put together already had plenty of extra length. So I'm gonna go get this cut a little shorter, and then we'll go get this drilled up. All right. Well, I'm starting to wonder, tighten that down good. Wondering if the wobble, because I got a lot of wobble in that bit while I was drilling, that glue up isn't as, yeah, you can see that wiggle. So this piece isn't moving, but that piece is wiggling. Tape is stretched just a little bit, gives it just a little wiggle. Doesn't hold it as perfect, but even though it's off center for the editor pen that I'm doing, that's going to work out fine. And because I had it glued up, it should. That came apart fine. And hopefully I didn't get any blowout this time in between my pieces. Just the littlest bit, but it's not really noticeable. Let's check this one here. Yeah, that piece looks good. All right, I'm gonna get these cleaned up, and I'll go get these glued onto my blanks and on to our next step here. So I guess one thing of note here while doing this is that if you're not trying to perfectly match up, like on the last piece, I was trying to match up the grain line that had in that spalting. These pieces, they don't even match. So I didn't need to glue them up and put them together other than just to test. But because of that wobble that I had in my drill bit, these are very, very tight because the bit is wobbling as it's drilling. So if you don't need to, it's entirely not necessary, and just makes your glue up a lot more difficult. So I could have just drilled these, just the single pieces as it was, and then not had that bit wobble, not had this problem for glue up. But now I do. Okay, got my barrel ends all trued up, and then I'm going to get this roughly shaped down. I am going to leave it proud of the bushings. That way we can bring our inlay down a little bit afterward. I'm going to use my parting tool just to clean up these ends. Get that little bit of glue rise up that I've got there. Square off my inlay section because I could see that one of them was actually just cant ever so slightly. Well, nobody else would have noticed. It would have driven me nuts. It's a very rough turn, as you can see. We've got a very, very rough finish here. Very rough finish there. So I'm going to just seal this up with a little CA glue, and then we will do our inlay. Alright, so now on to the real purpose for this test was actually to do this inlay. Wanted to use just pieces of scrap, that way if this turns out not to be any good, it's not a huge deal, it's just scrap. Although these pieces are nice, this has a nice figuring to it, it's a nice burl. They don't look so nice now with the black paint on them, but that's why we sealed them in. That way the black paint won't actually stain the wood. But I'm going to be doing Patrick Adair design. I got his permission from Patrick Adair Supplies to do the deep space inlay on my pens. And so I got some of the materials from their kits. I actually bought a ring from them at 1.2 to do the same design. And so we're going to do a deep space inspired design. I've changed it up just a little bit, kind of make it my own in this inlay piece as a practice for a future pen that I'm doing, just to make sure that I get the technique down, because I've never done something like this. So I wanted to practice it, but I figured while I practice it, might as well do it, make a nice pen out of it, and but also utilize some of my scraps I have sitting around the shop. So that's the whole purpose for this whole video that's taken way too long to do. So this kit from Patrick Adair uses malachite. So I've got malachite, got some amethyst, and then these 4 colors that I had to mix up. So I've got, this is a green pigment from Patrick Adair, some black, I think it's obsidian, some blue sapphire, and then some purple. And then his design, he takes green glow powder and adds that to all of it in different amounts. And for this one, I actually put blue glow powder in the blue, I put some purple glow powder in the purple here, I put green in the green, and then I put some aqua, which was like the brightest glowing of the white color glow powders available, and put that in the black. So I should have some aqua blue, green, some blue and purple glowing and mixing together by the time that it's all said and done. So even when it's glowing, it'll kind of have different varying colors in the background. So I think that's going to be a really cool effect. cedar pen. So here is our deep space inlay from Patrick Adair. Turned out really good. Malachite and amethyst in there, and then all those different colors and the glow powders. I'll go out to my garage later when it's dark and get some photos of that glowing. It's pretty neat. I looked at it a couple nights ago. But yeah, turned out really good. It was a nice tester. I enjoyed making this one. I'm going to go throw this online. This will be available for sale if you guys are interested. Sorry this video was so long. I ran into snags that I was not anticipating. But, you know, you live and you learn, and then you move on and strive forward and try a different way. And, you know, when they invented the light bulb, he failed 99 times and said, I only got to succeed once. But I found 99 different ways how not to make a light bulb. I found different ways how not to drill those out together. I've got another way that I'm going to do in a separate video that I guarantee will work using that same tape method. And putting an angle cut on my center band instead of a 90 so I can drill them together. And this way it's going to work, and it uses a temporary method that you can just take apart afterwards. So I'll do that in a separate video. I've got to get off and finish up the pen that I was testing this one out on for that inlay for the pen I'm coming out with next week. So stay tuned for that.